Good morning, everyone. Just give it a few minutes for everybody to join the session, and then we'll make a start. Okay. Yep. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. I hope this morning finds you all well, and for those of you who are currently stuck in lockdown, I hope you're faring well, and it's not impacting too much on your life. I know for sure I'm getting a little bit bored with not being able to go out, but hopefully it's not too bad for you guys. So yeah, thanks for joining. Today we're going to kind of go through and talk a little bit around the Sumo Logic Cloud SIEM Enterprise product. First of all, what we'll do is we're going to kind of jump in, look at a couple of presentation slides. I promise you it's not a death by PowerPoint. And what we'll do is we'll kind of talk about some of the challenges that security operations teams face today. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump across then into our live solution and actually take you through, kind of a day-to-day life of a SOC analyst, and I'll demonstrate how I would investigate some of the activity within the Cloud SIEM platform, and we'll kind of go through and take a deeper look. So, what are the challenges that face security operations today? One of the major things really is around cloud adoption. You know, we're kind of fast moving towards cloud services and solutions from that legacy on-prem. Gartner's forecasting that, you know, we're looking to grow cloud growth and cloud movement by around about 23% this year, and the total the total cost of that is going to be somewhere around $330+ billion to kind of transform to the cloud. Of course, part of that challenge is that security teams suddenly have to switch focus. You know, now we're no longer looking at having our solutions focused on-prem with our traditional endpoints, our traditional firewalls. Now we have to take into account, you know, our platform as a service, AWS, Guard Duty, Azure, AWS, GCP, Azure, and so on. And around about 3 out of 4 security teams agree that their cloud infrastructure is generating more security alerts than that typical on-prem solution. And that's certainly something I see with customers I work with. You know, the sheer volume of alerts coming off of those cloud solutions is, you know, far greater than we used to have traditionally with on-prem. The other problem there as well is that, you know, legacy security tools weren't necessarily built for that kind of cloud visibility. And a lot of the current solutions today just, you know, have a lot of challenges around, you know, how we can kind of take our visibility of cloud, encompass it with anything we may still have from a legacy perspective, you know, on premise, and get that kind of complete view across, be able to correlate across those multiple sources. Of course, the problem we also have as well is as we're moving across to the cloud, then our threat landscape is moving with it. So gone are the days of having to, you know, just monitor for malware on endpoints, you know, looking for somebody probing my firewall or threats, you know, from typical things like phishing emails. You know, now we have to take into consideration things like unsecure S3 buckets, you know, simple misconfigurations that suddenly exposing data publicly. And of course, on top of that, you know, we're seeing more and more attacks. We're seeing more zero-day threats. The ransomware attacks continues all the time. You know, it's adjusting, it's changing, and it's becoming big business, as we know. So the final kind of key piece to that really is, now I'm suddenly generating a lot more security alerts than I used to. My teams cannot scale. Security teams cannot scale to be able to look at those threats in a timely manner. Around about 83% of security teams are reporting that they're suffering from alert fatigue. And I've certainly worked with customers in the past where their SOC teams are facing 8 to 9 million events a day that they have to go through. There's just far too many alerts, and having legacy tools and multiple legacy tools to investigate those is a real challenge. So essentially, we need to modernize our security operations. We need to use something like a Cloud SIEM solution, something that's built in the cloud, that is able to take those cloud events and also the traditional on-premise and be able to look across all of those strategically. So this is where Sumo Logic's Cloud SIEM Enterprise is kind of a completely different solution to what we have traditionally seen. Some of the key points, I guess, apart from what you guys can see on the presentation there, we have the ability within Cloud SIEM to be able to take that traditional volume of security alerts that comes through, and we can perform automatic investigation and triage of those alerts. And we do that using our insight clustering capability. So instead of having to sit now as an analyst and look at thousands of alerts that are coming through, the clustering capability within the product is actually starting to track entities, whether that's a user, it's an IP address, a host or something. And it also tracks the severity of the security signals that are being generated as well. But not just, on those detection capabilities, I also need a solution that's going to keep pace with that increased volume. If unfortunately I get hit by something like a denial of service attack, I need to have a SIEM solution that's going to automatically scale up for me. I'm not suddenly going to, have my ingestion fall over because my volume of logs and events coming in is too high. Another key thing as well with the Sumo Logic platform is the ability for it to be used by multiple teams. So I can use my security operations teams, obviously, to do their investigations, but also IT ops, DevOps. If I'm going to bring all of my logs into one central place, let's use that for everybody. Within Sumo, we use a term democratization of data. If I'm going to pay to ingest it, let's make it available to everybody in the organization to be able to track and do what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. The other kind of key things there as well, rapid time to value. Traditionally with a lot of old SIEM solutions and certainly some of the ones I've worked with in the past, the time from physically switching it on to then having to go through and to do tuning of correlation rules, deployment of collectors, and so on, typically could take months up to a year to get it to a reasonable status. However, with Sumo Logic's Cloud SIEM platform, using a combination of our out-of-the-box content and our clustering capability, we generally find our time to value is incredibly quick. I can recall working with a customer fairly recently where literally within a couple of days of deploying the solution, literally switching it on and ingesting their logs, we were able to detect some fairly malicious activity against one of their global presences. So, the time to value for that particular customer was incredibly fast. Something we're pretty proud of here as well at Sumo Logic is that we were recognized by Gartner this year in the Magic Quadrant for SIEM. So, as you can see here, we kind of landed as a visionary as our first landing spot. And we're pretty proud of that. To come in at that visionary level with the solution we have where we just didn't have that presence before, I think is good testament to the product we have. And all of the teams that kind of work in the background to get that product in a good place. Additionally, as well, we've had really good recognition for the critical capabilities in the Gartner SIEM report. So with that, at Sumo, we've got several solutions around security intelligence. The main one we're going to focus on today is going to be Cloud SIEM. But we cover everything from audit and compliance, from your basic kind of I need to log things with the ability to run searches and hold it there for compliance. Cloud security monitoring and analytics, maybe for a customer who doesn't have a dedicated security operations team, but wants to have some visibility across multiple platforms, whether you're ingesting AWS, Google, Azure, on-prem. Our cloud security monitoring analytics platform gives you that visibility across that level. And of course, it has built-in threat intelligence from CrowdStrike as well. So I'm able to kind of take that threat intel and leverage it across all of my sources. Cloud SIEM is what we're going to jump into in a second. And then the last piece there for Sumo is that we have a Cloud SOAR product as well, and that kind of integrates nicely with Cloud SIEM. So that takes me on a complete piece now. Not only do I have automation of my investigation phase in Cloud SIEM, but I can also automate the reactions. What do I want the solution to do? Quarantining endpoints, forcing user password changes, going out and grabbing lots of bits of information about a potential threat to enrich and give me a better picture of what's going on. So this is a very quick, brief view here then of our Cloud SIEM Enterprise heads-up display. Just one kind of highlight here before I jump into the platform. You can see there, that kind of number, the highlighted box in the top left-hand corner. So this is where we're taking records, ingested events from all of those different sources. They then get run across our rules engine, and that can be somewhere between 400 to 500 out-of-the-box rules. But also I have the ability to be able to create custom rules there as well, if I've got custom applications, that kind of thing. And then what happens is our insight clustering has a look at all of those signals that are being generated, and it distills those down into a much more manageable number. So from that quick example on the screen there, and again, you'll see this when I jump in, you can see how we're going from 10 million events down to 7 things that the SOC team needs to focus on, and have a look at. So with that, let me just pivot across to the Cloud SIEM. Just bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, cool. All right. So this is our what we call our heads-up display. I'll kind of point out a couple of things here before we start to dive in, and I'll show you, a day-to-day view as an analyst. So we've kind of covered this this set of numbers up here in the top left. My records, my signals, my insights. Here the ratio is going from 5 million events down to 8 insights. So those are a group of clustered signals. Additionally, here in the heads-up display, over here on this left-hand panel, I've got some typical SOC metrics here, which are pretty important. So what's my mean time to detect? How long is it taking me to detect an incident on average? How long is it taking me to respond to that incident? And then how long does it take me to remediate, to actually investigate and close that particular insight down? That same information is presented there, just in a couple of different types of graphs. And then in the center of my screen, I again have some of that key information displayed here. You'll see it refreshes automatically there for me as well. So this outer ring, these are my records coming through. Within our demo environment, that's actually pretty linear. But in a normal organization environment, I'd expect to see some peaks and troughs here associated with, typical peak logon times, weekends, evenings, and so on. The additional benefit there as well is if I'm seeing some unusual spikes above what I would normally expect, it it could indicate I've got a problem somewhere. I may be having a denial of service attack. Maybe I've got a misconfiguration somewhere that's suddenly generating more events. And these again are reflected by these percentage numbers here. So I can see my record count is up 10% on this time in the last 24 hours and so on. And then finally here, in the middle one here, these are my signals that are being generated. Again, pretty linear within our demo environment. And then finally in the center, these are my insights that are being generated. So I can actually hover over these and get a little bit of basic information. The colors are going to be dependent on the status. So red is going to be for new insights, amber are for insights that are in progress, and then I could also see them in green and white, and they would indicate whether they're recently closed or whether they've been reassigned to a dedicated team. Finally, here on my heads up display, this is kind of a baseball card view of my latest insight that's been generated. We'll take a deeper look at one of these in a second, but to call out a couple of main points here, you can see the name of the insight is actually aligned with the MITRE attack framework. So every single one of our signals that gets generated is aligned with either a tactic or a technique from the attack stage framework, okay? And they're fully customizable. If I go in and I create my own custom rules, then I also have the ability to apply those tags accordingly. The other pieces of information here, here's the entity involved. So in this case, it's a username. And then I have some quick information here relating to this particular insight. So I know that there are 3 clustered signals. The overall severity of this one is high. The mean time to detect here was 3 hours. So essentially from the first signal to the last signal, there was a 3-hour window before we generated this into an insight. And then I have a global confidence rating here as well. This is something that's pretty new to the Cloud SIEM platform. It's also pretty unique in the SIEM market. Because we're a cloud native platform, we have the ability to kind of look at how our customers' signals and insights are generated. We take some of that information, we completely anonymize it, and then we kind of look at how those insights are being treated. So for example, if customers are closing them as false positives, as no action, or as a true incident, then we take that information and we then start to build a bit of a picture around how true we believe this alert to be. So for example, here a 95 global confidence would indicate that we're actually fairly confident this isn't a false positive. This is a real incident in this environment. And then finally, here on the right-hand side at the bottom, it's just a quick snapshot view. Shows me what insights are coming in, shows me which of my teams, which of my SOC analysts are actually working on incidents. So I have that kind of quick view with this heads-up display. Okay, I'm going to jump in now, take you into the insight view. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start focusing now on being a SOC analyst and how I would investigate this as part of my day-to-day view. So this is what we call our Kanban viewboard. All of my new insights generated automatically appear here in the left-hand column. If I want to start assigning these across to in progress or dedicated teams, what I can actually do is just simply drag and drop these across to the relevant team. Okay, and that's now reassigned it to tier 3, for example. These are all completely customizable. If I don't have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, but I have just a handful of SOC analysts, then I can actually go in and create this in their own name. You'll notice the color bar here changes as well, and that is reflected in those little triangles that we saw at the site in the heads-up display. Now, as a SOC analyst here, I've got a couple of options. If I'm focusing on the new insights that are being generated, I can do one or two things, right? I can just work my way from the top and go down. – anything at the top is going to be my latest ones generated. but I might want to focus on that global confidence we talked about. So what I can do here is I can actually do a sort by confidence score. So I'm going to do that by descending, okay? And now what that's done is it's brought my highest confidence insights to the top. So I could actually start to work through these, in turn and investigate each one, okay? So as I scroll down through here, you can actually see there's quite a few there, which we're fairly confident are real incidents. To come in now and actually start my investigation, I'm going to pick this one here. I click on the insight name, okay? Again, you can see the insight name here it's a combination of a sequential number. So the one following this, of course, would be 3211. And then we have the MITRE ATT&CK framework stages that are extracted and put in there as the insight name. So this is what I like to call my kind of workbench. Now, as an analyst, I get a quick view of what this insight is about. I've got kind of three key panels here now as part of this, this particular workbench. My left-hand panel here is where I can assign it to myself. So if I just simply click there, that's going to reassign it to me. I can mark this one as in progress. Okay. If I wanted to pass it to a specific team, I can do that via the actions here, but we'll come back to that in a second. Additionally, here then is some of that key information, and we saw that in that snapshot view at the start in the heads-up display. So my overall severity level is high. The global confidence that we've generated for this one is 95, so we're pretty sure this is a real incident. And then there's some additional information here around, when the insight was generated, what was the dwell time, that mean time to detect that we talked about. And then here I can see the appropriate MITRE ATT&CK framework tags that have been associated with these. I've also got an area down here to add some comments. I can create additional tags on the fly if I need to. Over here on the right-hand side, my histogram here really is a timeline of activity for these particular events that were generated, or these signals. And now what I can do is, as I'm scrolling down through here, I can see each of the three signals that were generated as part of this insight. And at this high level, I can see what the signal type is. So this is a threat intel match for the domain name. Here's my severity level for this particular signal. Again, we're tracking on the entity. So I would expect to have my user consistent in all of these as I scroll through. Just to point out a couple of things. So every time an event comes into Cloud SIEM, dependent on what type of event it is, if it's got an external IP address, we do an ASN lookup and populate all of that information in there. If it's got a URL, we do typical threat intel lookup against that. And you can see here, this is the threat intel list that we're matching on. But additionally, we do a couple of other things as well. We do an entropy lookup against the URL. Sometimes the higher the entropy score, the more likely it is to be malicious. We also do things like Alexa score ranking as well against the domain names and so on. Okay. So with this quick snapshot view here, I've got all of that key pieces of information that I need. I can see that this has come from a Zscaler device. It was allowed. As I'm scrolling down through here, here is my related Zscaler event. So again, the information is consistent. Here's the URL that's involved. The action was allow, and here's my username. And then finally, my last signal here, which, as you can see, has got a pretty high severity, is telling me that there was a malicious keylogger detected on an endpoint. And again, it's associated with the same user. So now as a SOC analyst, just looking at these three signals, it's quite clear that the user's clicked on a malicious link. Some software or some malicious software has been downloaded. and that's now active on the endpoint. Okay. If I kind of think about this in a more traditional SIEM sense, I may have got a malware alert or a virus alert from my endpoint security tool, and then I may have to start jumping across to different tools to build a picture. Do a search on the username. What else did the user do around that time? Are there any related firewall events? Did you receive any malicious emails, etc.? And I'd have to kind of manually step through that. Even with a SIEM platform, I'd still have to do some of that manual correlation. But because our clustering capability is automatically correlating those relevant signals based on the user and the severity, then it's brought that to the, highlighted it up to an insight for me. And I'm probably bringing my investigation time here from maybe a couple of hours down to literally a couple of minutes. Okay. So what's my next point of action here? Well, if I'm integrated with a SOAR product, I probably want to get this endpoint quarantined. Okay. So I can simply come down here. I can create this now as a contained host on the EDR, okay? And that could be either through an integration with using a SOAR product to do that, or I could have a direct integration that would send a command off to my endpoint device. So I simply click on that. It's now going to execute that action, okay? And now, on the other end of this, my endpoint would be quarantined. Now, when it gets to this point here, I've kind of done my investigation. I'm ready to close this insight. What I can do now is I can come in here and say, it was resolved. For my additional comments, I might just want to put something like, user clicked on malicious link and malware downloaded. Sorry, I'm not sure I spell it right. There we go. And now I can close that insight off. Okay, so my whole workflow is contained here within this kind of workbench area. However, if I'm using an external ticketing tool like ServiceNow, I might want to leverage something like a Slack notification. Then I also have the ability to do that as well. And again, I would do that via the actions button here. So, I could push this off to ServiceNow. I could send it off to a specific Slack team, maybe a desktop team or something. And I could say, hey guys, you guys need to go and investigate this and rebuild or re-image the machine and so on. Okay. So that kind of demonstrates the insight clustering capability. Again, just to kind of point out, so the insight does its clustering based on two things, actually three things. One is the entity, whether that's the user, the IP address, the host name. Second one is going to be the severity score. Okay, so it tracks the severity score for each of these signals that were generated. Once that threshold gets to around about 13 points or more, then they're all clustered together. They're put together into one insight, and then that insight is generated. The third piece as well is that out of the box, we can go back over 14 days. So that gives me the ability to kind of have some control over low and slow attacks as well. I can go back further than that if I want to. 14 days is what we have out of the box. But a good example there, if I was going to spring a user credentials, I've maybe sent out a phishing email, okay, and I've got a user now to click through and they've gone to a fake Office 365 website. So now I've got that user's credentials. I might log in as that user. I might monitor their email for a week, find out what's their job function, who do they collaborate with. And then maybe after a week, I might start to have a bit more of a poke around in the environment. I might look at what they have access to from a file share perspective. And because those signals are going to happen several days apart, in some of the more traditional SIEM platforms, it's really hard to correlate back over those time windows. Whereas, we have that capability within the product to be able to do that. So those are the kind of key three things around insight generation. again, I'm going to take you back and show you one more. This one's kind of a favorite one of mine, because a lot of my time as a SOC analyst in the past has been based around tracking phishing emails and that kind of thing. And I can definitely say from experience, if I had a user that had a phishing email come through, and maybe they phoned the help desk and said, "Hey, I've got this, this email, and I've clicked on the link." It could take a good 2 hours to kind of build up a picture of what's happened for that particular user. But again, using this clustering capability, as I'm scrolling down through here now, again with my kind of SOC analyst hat on, I can see I've got an alert here to say that an email was received with a phishing link. Okay, click was permitted. That's the key thing there. If I want some more information about this particular signal, I can actually click through. And I now get some more in-depth information here about what's going on. So all of my extracted fields that I would expect to have been part of that original alert, you can see that they're all being pulled into this particular view. I have the ability here to be able to look at the full details. Okay, so this particular log file, for example, comes through in JSON format. So I can see all of the relevant fields here at this view, just in case there's anything there that I might want to kind of go through and grab separately. I can also look at the raw log as well. Sometimes it takes a couple of seconds for this to be generated because it has to kind of grab that raw log. But again, this is it's nicely formatted in JSON format. If it was a syslog, Ceph file or something, then I'd expect to see it in that original format as well. Okay. Coming back to the overview, again, from an investigation perspective, all of my key pieces of information are extracted here into this header. You'll notice these little gold stars. That gives me the ability here to favorite these fields and populate them into this header. It just makes my life easy. I can quickly scan this and I can go, okay, so click was permitted. Here's my Alexa score rank we talked about, the entropy scores, what was the threat name, who is the user involved, and so on. Coming back to this signal view, again, as I'm scrolling down through here, now I've got a checkpoint alert here to say the malicious file was detected. Then I'm ending up here pretty much with a CrowdStrike, an endpoint detection summary event that's telling me that malware was detected on the endpoint. And again, here I've got a threat intel against the file hash involved. So kind of just to point out again, it's like taking me maybe 2 minutes to investigate this particular incident. Whereas, if I didn't have a SIEM or I was running with a traditional legacy platform, I may have got a threat intel. I may have got an alert from my endpoint security device to say malware detected and not cleaned or something. And then I'd have to start digging around, doing a search on the user. What else did the user do around about this time? What led up to that malware alert and so on. Okay. So that kind of covers off the insights and the capability there. We also automatically enrich our signals and insights as they come through. So here I've got enrichment coming through from CrowdStrike, gives me a bit more information about the endpoint itself. Okay, I've got things like NS lookup information coming through. If I've got an account with VirusTotal, then I can plug in the API. And I would also get a bit of information there from VirusTotal as well. Tell me how many engines that particular file hash had been scanned against, what was the result, whether it's known malicious and that kind of thing. Okay. Within a signal as well, I also have the ability to be able to pivot out to external things. So if I take the file hash here, okay, I've got a context menu. Where's my context menu? I can go and do a VirusTotal search from here, for example. if I want to go and do a raw search for this, this particular file hash, I can go and do a raw search to find out where else I may have seen that in my environment. Okay, so there's like a couple of different options there as well. And these are all customizable. You know, if I've got a particular website that I prefer to use as a SOC analyst to do lookups for IPs and domains and file hashes, then I can create an action manually to do that and actually come in and you know, leverage that site. It'll just open up in another tab. So there's no having to copy and paste, you know, and jump to another website to be able to do that. Let me take you through to signals as well. So signals are kind of where traditionally I would be sat and I'd be focusing my time. So, you know, this is where I might come in the morning or the start of my shift and start looking through these 254 signals that have been generated. Again, I've got the ability here to sort by severity. So I can do some of those things as well. But the insight takes all of that guesswork away for me. You know, it's going to look at these, it's going to look at the entity and cluster those together based on the severity. But if I want to do that traditional threat hunting, you know, I can just come in here and start looking at particular signals that are being generated. You can see here as well, we have network sensors that are part of our product that you can deploy. And then we curate Yara rules as well that will scan that traffic for you automatically. Okay. The other area as well, which is kind of a key area within the product, is our entity area. So every time a signal is generated, we extract the entity. And again, that could be, you know, a username, host name, IP address, and so on. They get populated into this entity view here. And from this top level, you know, I can see who's the entity on that left-hand side. I can see my activity score down the right-hand side here and where we're currently tracking. And remember, I said out of the box, you know, we generate our insights when that activity score reaches 13 points or more. So if I want to look at a particular entity and see what's happening with that user or that IP address, I can click into the view. This shows me all of the current signals that are being tracked for this particular entity. Okay, so my user here, Joe Smith, is currently generating these signals that are being clustered together towards that score. And again, you know, from this point, if I think actually I'm going to just go and have a look at this now, I can click through to any of these from this point and have a look. If this user had generated any previous insights, then they would be listed down here. Something to point out as well. So we have a concept of criticality scoring within the product as well. So for this particular example, Joe Smith might be my chief finance officer. Okay. So Joe is, he has the responsibility and the ability to do things like change bank account payments for outgoing invoice payments. He may authorize payments to a third-party supplier, something like that. Now, because of that risk, and you know, we know how bad spear phishing can be in an environment trying to get you know, payment diversion, trying to get false invoices paid, and so on. I might want to apply a criticality score to this particular user. What that allows me to do is to actually pick a multiplication here. So every time a signal is generated, I could say I want you to double the severity value for that signal for this particular user, okay, because he has assigned this criticality. You know, and again, looking at what's being generated here for this user, phishing emails coming through, you know, I'd be concerned about that, obviously, because of his job title. And this gives me the ability to double the severity scores accordingly. Now, what I can also do is I can say, you know, I want you to multiply the severity score by X. I want you to add 2 points of risk, multiply. So on the flip side of that, if I've got an asset or a user in my environment that generates a lot of noise, but we know it's not malicious, then I can say, hey, just dial down the severity a little bit for this, maybe a legacy server or something. So I've got the ability to do that either way. I can elevate the risk, or I can reduce the risk with that associated entity. Okay. A couple of other things to point out here as well is we have Active Directory enrichment, for example. So if I find an AD related user, then I get an Active Directory panel. I'm not sure why I'm seeing two of these at the moment. You wouldn't normally, but there we go. And I can also expand this information as well, and I can bring more information in, according to what I want to extract from Active Directory. So here I can pull information like which department the user's in, who's the manager, that kind of thing. Okay, so it's just some additional context for investigation. And that kind of sums up the detection side of it. Let me talk a little bit around the content. Let me just check the time a second. Yeah, we're all good. And okay, so I've got a quick question there as well, which I'll answer with regards to, do we need to first parse these into uniform name fields? That's a good question. So all of our events that come into Cloud SIEM Enterprise come via the Sumo Logic core platform. And essentially what happens is we have a normalized schema within Cloud SIEM Enterprise. So as all of the log sources come in, using our out-of-the-box mapping or custom parsing, if I've got custom log sources, then I can normalize the fields. Okay. So if I've got a firewall log, an email log, a Windows event log, and the value for the username is different in all of those, we normalize those across to one value within Cloud SIEM. So now, obviously, within Cloud SIEM, as with the majority of other SIEM products, if I do a search on username, I'll get the same result regardless of what my log source is. Okay, so hopefully that's kind of answered that question for you. I can create a field extraction rule, as you've mentioned there. Typically, I might want to do that if, say I'm bringing events in from Windows. I'm going to use that as an example, but I don't want all of the events to come into Cloud SIEM. I only want to look at security and maybe a handful of system events. Then I could use a field extraction rule. And for those of you not familiar with Sumo, what that essentially allows me to do is to say, hey, I just want you to grab these fields and forward these to Cloud SIEM. And don't worry about the rest. Log them in the core platform. I might need those for compliance. But yeah, using what we call a field extraction rule would give me the ability to just forward that across on an as required basis. Okay. So I mentioned at the beginning, we have somewhere around about 400 to 500 out of the box content rules. Let me just bring those up. Ignore that number there because this is kind of a demo environment. So some of my team come in and create some custom content here. These rules cover the majority of common vendors, everything from Windows to firewalls to email, cloud services, AWS, GCP, whatever. We have all of our content rules that are there. These are updated at least twice a week, I would say. And within the product, if ever you wanted to see, what the latest content is, you get a little red notification up here that you can see. When I click on that one and go to announcements, okay, here is all of my release content that is coming through. So I can see here, for example, in a few days' time, then this is going to be some of the changes coming into the platform. Okay, so that's another benefit of having a cloud native solution, is that we automatically deploy updates to you, content rules and so on. You don't have to download them and manually apply them. All of our content, all of our feature updates are all tested across multiple systems internally before we release. They go through the usual beta stages, that kind of thing. Okay, so by the time they reach the end user, as we can see here in this panel, then it's all been tested, it's all good to go. And the good thing here as well is because the guys that build our content are SOC analysts, or they've been SOC analysts, they have a really good handle on upcoming threats. Think back SolarWinds a couple of months ago. Literally within a day or two, we had updated content out to detect things like SolarWinds. So they constantly update the rule set to reflect any new threats and new log sources, that kind of thing. When it comes to the actual rules itself, if I need to modify something in here, then I can either modify the original rule, okay, and you do that by copying it, disable the original, and then work on your modified rule. But we also have another thing here, and again, there's not many SIEM platforms that allow you to do this, and it's the concept of a rule tuning. So this is an additional filter context that I can overlay on top. And let me just pick one here that one of my colleagues has done. Essentially, what this allows me to do is to put something like an exclusion in, okay? So if I'm getting lots of alerts about something in my environment, but maybe it's from a system account or something, and that's quite normal, but I don't want to disable the rule because that might introduce a blind spot. What I can do is I can actually apply a filter over the top, and I can say a username is not the system account or something. And I can do that with IP, host, I could do it with a process name. Pretty much anything I want, I can put in there as an exclusion. And I can apply it on a single rule, multiple rules, or all of my rules, okay? And the great thing about that is because I'm not modifying the existing rule, then as Sumo comes along and we update the content to make the detection better, then you can be assured that the base rule itself is still there and it's still being updated as and when required, which is a really cool feature. I want to just very quickly show you what a rule looks like in our environment. If you're familiar with SQL, then building out our rules is really straightforward. Okay, let me just pick one here at random. And I go and pick one that looks pretty intense, but actually it's not. So as I come into my rule here, this is how we build our rules out. And this is the same, if you're creating a new rule from scratch. So if I want to do a chain rule, aggregation rule, match rule, or whatever, we have the ability to do all of those from scratch with custom sources. But literally it's using an SQL query type language to build the rule out. So for example, if I was putting a new rule in for something like auth0, then my rule would just say, something like metadata vendor is auth0. And then I might say, and event ID is XYZ, and it's as simple as that to build a rule out for detection. Here I'm specifying what I want it to look at as a trigger point. So it's this is based on IPs and host names, for example. And then the summary and the description is what's going to be generated as part of the signal. So again, if I pop back to here, then I'm hoping I've picked the right one. But yeah, here's the description. Okay, and that's customizable. So I can populate whatever I want in there. The name itself, I can also customize from my rule. So for the name, if I wanted to also include the IP address or the username, then I can add those in as dynamic values, okay? And it will populate that value in when it creates it. Then as I come down through, I set my severity, apply any tags that are related to the MITRE attack framework, okay? Another cool feature here is the ability to prototype it. So if I'm creating a new rule, then I can come in and set it as a prototype. Okay, so I'm not going to, I'm not going to bombard my platform with a load of insights being generated over the weekend or over the night. I'm sure, we've all kind of experienced that. By setting it to prototype, it's going to create signals. Okay, so I can see how the rule behaves, but it's not going to generate a load of insights for me. And then as I scroll down through, I can actually see the history of this particular rule as well. How many insights it's generated, how many signals it's generated previously. So there's a whole stack of information, which I think is really good. It's all in one place. I don't have to keep jumping out to different areas of the platform to gather this information. I even get a little display here of when the signal was triggered and how many times. Okay, so again, I don't need to go out and jump somewhere else to see how it's behaving. Okay. So pretty much to quickly kind of wrap up now, on top of what I've shown you here, so I can also bring in external threat intelligence feeds. I can do those using manual uploads. If I want to bring something in from a CSV file, or I can use sticks or taxi feeds. On top of that, I can leverage what we call a match list. So a match list might contain something like a list of my vulnerability scanners, which I then use to suppress noise. We talked a little bit about the network sensor and how we can deploy those in the environment. And like I said, we can bring Yara rules in and scan that network traffic. And then I have the usual thing, the ability to be able to suppress an entity. Maybe I've got a legacy server or something that's incredibly noisy, and I want it to be able to kind of suppress the noise from that. Okay. So that pretty much kind of wraps up Cloud SIEM. I just want to pivot back a second to my presentation, just to leave you with a QR code on the screen. Just bear with me 2 seconds. There you go. Okay. So that QR code that you guys can see on the screen there, if you use your mobile or do a screen grab or something, that would take you off to, to be able to gather some more information on the product. Let me just have a quick look at any open questions there. Okay, yeah, it's a good question. AWS infrastructure workloads, what would be the recommended logs to ingest to utilize Cloud SIEM? So for AWS, we support out of the box CloudTrail, GuardDuty, Security Hub, VPC, as the key ones. So those are the ones that the majority of my customers bring into the platform. Gives really good visibility of what's going on across those. So those are kind of the key ones. Having said that, we can bring in any log source. We have the ability to build custom ingest mapping, custom rules, any kind of custom content. Sorry, I've got a customer who uses a bespoke customer-facing login portal, and they wanted to look for unusual activity around that. And we were able to literally ingest that into Sumo, create a custom mapper and custom content, and have it triggering with useful information in around about 30 minutes. Okay, so again, our content creation within the platform is really, really quick. Again, going back to that time to value that I talked about. Okay. So that kind of sums it up. If anybody else has got any other questions, we've probably got just a couple more minutes there. And I will mark those two as being answered live. There we go. Other than that, like I said, please feel free to jump onto the Sumo website, grab some more information. It'll give you some links there on how to contact us for further information. And apart from that, thank you very much for joining this webinar. I hope you found the information useful, and we've kind of demonstrated the capabilities of our Cloud SIEM product. I'll be honest, as an ex-SOC analyst and somebody who's worked with other SIEM tools, I get excited about demonstrating this every day because it's such an awesome tool. It looks cool. functionality is brilliant, and it's really good. So I will leave you with that. Thank you very much for your time. Stay safe, everybody, and we will catch up with you soon. Thank you.